My name is Kurt Ackerman, and we have just officially kicked off with our Local Voices panel discussion. Thank you for being here. As I said, my name is Kurt Ackerman, and I am with the South African Urban Food and Farming Trust, and we are the hosts of the Food Dialogues. And I'll tell you a bit more about the panel now. I just want to share my screen and take you through some introductory information. So again, thanks for being here. Just gonna turn off my video so that you guys can see the screen. Yeah, I want to welcome everyone here. The Food Dialogues were something that we first hosted back in 2014, and it was conceived of and has been a program to help bring underrepresented and marginalized voices to the discussion of food system issues, to deepen understanding of these issues and opportunities within the food system, and to foster mutual understanding among diverse stakeholders, to try and help identify a set of common priorities, to facilitate ongoing collaboration, and generally to support improved food system governance and accelerate positive change within our food system. Last year in the Food Dialogues, we had 28 expert speakers and moderators across 51 sessions. We engaged in over 16 hours of recorded dialogues with nearly 900 participants. And I just want to share brief highlights of that to kind of set the stage for today.
Without the guarantee of the right to food first, several other rights can't be guaranteed.
This is possibly the biggest revival of civic activism in South Africa since the 1980s.
Colonial influence is still something wholly obvious.
The best way of decolonizing our food system starts with breastfeeding.
We need to encourage them to go back to the traditional food.
Kind of confession of the deeply unequal dynamics that are operative in this society.
What we have is a serious systemic problem.
Kind of complex intersection of culture, of economics, of politics that play out in food.
It results in this kind of dual food system.
Support small-scale producers.
This criminalization and overregulation of the informal sector.
If you're poor, food is a chore. If you're well off, food is an experience.
We all know that our food system is broken.
Charity doesn't change the system.
I'm anxious to ask people to help themselves when the system has been designed to exclude so many.
So for 2021, we've taken last year's event as a point of departure, trying to bring further diversity of voices into the dialogue regarding our food system and turning a bit away from the so-called experts and toward the lived experiences of individuals who engage in their own ways with the food system daily and over the course of a lifetime. And in our own ways, of course, we're all experts in that we all eat, we all have our own intimate knowledge of our own food lives. And the format this year is also a bit different, still pandemic constrained. We do hope to meet in person and at some point to not just talk about food, but also do some eating together. And here we find there are many more conversations happening on different platforms. So whereas last year we had hundreds of participants across 5 sessions and 16 hours of recorded content, in our pandemic constrained world and a focus on the food system that's come to the fore, we find ourselves just this week having conversations at the United Nations with the Food Systems Summit. We have the Global People's Food Summit. The local Cape Town-based Co-Create Design Festival has a food focus this year, and that's just this week's events. And all of this is a hopeful indicator of the interest in and the recognition of the importance of our food system to people both locally and around the world. So while there's a lot going on, it also means there's a lot of focus on what needs to happen. I want to also acknowledge and thank our co-host and sponsor, Solve at the Waterfront. They've been an amazing contributor and sponsor to the Food Dialogues this year, and also our co-sponsor, the DRF Center of Excellence in Food Security. And an important thank you to our partners as well, the African Center for Cities, the Southern African Food Lab, ICLEI Africa, the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape Government, the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership, the Arnie City Farm and Market, and the Derrick Creative Agency. And thanks, of course, to all of you for being here. So we kicked off the Food Dialogues 2 weeks ago with remarkable interviews of people from all walks of life sharing their stories, experiences. And if you did happen to miss any of those, they are available for replay on the Food Dialogues platform at any time. And you're also invited to share your own story. So one of the important things is that we all have food stories, right? We all eat. And if you haven't already done this, we encourage you to record a short video that tells of an experience, an event, or a perspective on food that's important to you. And details on how to do this are described in the Share Your Own Stories talk, which is in the replays section of the Food Dialogues platform. I'll post that link in the chat as well, so you can check it out. And from those interviews, we're fortunate to be in discussion with some of the people interviewed, and a chance to look more deeply at the ideas for solutions to the challenges, dreams for the future, opportunities for ordinary people to help one another. And what these people have to say may surprise you, may make you cry, laugh, or inspire you, but it's certainly going to change the way you think about our food system. And I think that's really exciting. And as I said before, everybody eats. We all have a say in our food system, and certainly should. And we want to hear from you this morning. Please, with your questions, use the Q&A function. So the chat function of the webinar is available. We can talk to each other that way, but if you want to promote something to a question for our panelists, for our moderator, Leonie, please put it in the Q&A and we'll do our best to get those addressed. And speaking of Leonie, we are so pleased to have at the session today, Leonie Joubert moderating. She's an award-winning journalist, author of The Hungry Season, Tomatoes and Taxi Ranks, among other books and writing achievements. And she's been the rapporteur for last year's Food Dialogues report and author of a previous Food Dialogues report. She's very knowledgeable. And today she's channeling her inner Oprah, because she's not putting anyone under the gun to ask them hard questions, but really to engage in conversation with the food stories and lives of the people who are here with us today. And so finally, before I hand over to Leonie, please note we have another event tomorrow, also starting at 10. That'll be moderated by the author and food activist Isha Govender, in conversation with 3 remarkable chefs about a home-cooked plate of food that each has chosen to bring to the virtual table that highlights something about the way that food connects us with each other, our heritage, our land, our beliefs. It's something called Dialogues Through Food, and they'll ask some provocative, and forgive me for saying tasty, questions, including about the role and power of food in food culture in our society, and whether a plate of food is ever just a plate of food. So please don't miss out. So thank you once again for being here. Enjoy the session, and over to you, Leonie.
Thank you, Kurt, and lovely to join all of you, and lovely to be able to introduce today's panelists to you. Over the years, it's been such a privilege to walk alongside the Food Dialogues process, because the curation of ideas through the Food Dialogues has been so important in terms of trying to understand the food system, and trying to understand food and hunger and obesity and the economic and political forces that are steering us in specific directions in terms of our health, our culture, our relationship with food. And some of the most, shall I say, skilled and knowledgeable academics on the continent have been part of this Food Dialogues process. And over the years, we've been able to scrutinize and think about the food system from these very different perspectives, using different data points, using very clever analysis. Today, though, we want to talk about the lived experience, because behind, or should I say in front of all of those data points, all of those bits of hard information, are the real stories of real people. And these stories shine a light on this very complex food system. So today, we're not going to give hard data about the problems with the food system. We're going to sit around a kitchen table with our cup of tea or coffee in front of us, and we're going to have a conversation about these people's lived experiences in order to understand this food system. So today is just about you and I, all of us, living together within this complicated food system. So Sindiswa Manxeba is a retired domestic worker. She's a mother, a grandmother, and she's a community leader in Imizamo Yethu. She runs a soup kitchen here for children, and she also serves as a chairperson for the local school governing body. Traci Kwaai is a 6th generation fisher child from Kalk Bay. She's an artist, a storyteller, an entrepreneur, and she is dedicated to elevating the lost stories of Black and Brown communities. She offers immersive walking tours in Kalk Bay, which I can highly recommend, and she creates culturally informed products and leads impactful collaborations with local change makers. Benson Arendse grew up on the Cape Flats. As a young boy, he developed a desire for food, he says, and had to work his way into the kitchen by way of doing the dishes. This is where his journey began. Benson and his partner Barbara are both involved, both entrepreneurs. They run a custom cookies business and as well as a coffee and chili sauce business. Benson is interested in urban farming, organic waste, and youth development. All right, so Sindiswa, let's start with you. I would like you to tell us a story from your childhood, a memory that allows us to see what sort of food, what sort of meal most brings up a positive emotional response in you. What meal reminds you of your childhood and your culture that makes you feel warm and fuzzy? Sindiswa, are you there? Okay, I think we may have lost Sindiswa. Traci, shall we move on to you? Let's ask the same question of you. Can you start by telling us a story, a memory of a meal from your childhood that most locates you within your family, community, and culture?
Well, coming from a fishing community with sometimes a scarcity of fish and a scarcity of food, the people in the community, and including my mum and our family, had to forage. And we forage mainly shellfish. And one specific shellfish that we would forage is something that we call a klipkoos. And going into the history, while reading up about histories, I discovered that the Dutch once called a klipkoos a klipkoosen. So it obviously comes from that. And I actually brought a shell just to show everyone, and it looks like that. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see that. And on the inside, it's all pearly. So it looks a bit similar to a pelamon, and lots of people call it a Venus ear because it looks like an ear. And my mum would go there with her boots, her gum boots or fishing boots, the boots that all fishermen wore, and a screwdriver, and she would harvest just enough klipkoos to make a pot of curry, klipkoos curry with peas and potatoes and lots of rice, so we could stretch it out. So that for me was one of my most favorite meals. And also just general other seafoods like crayfish and pelamon, which back then was poor man's food. So any kind of fish dish. And also the breadies, because it was warm. So cabbage breadie was actually also one of my favorite foods growing up. Yeah.
That's wonderful, thank you. Traci has promised to introduce me to klipkoos curry. So we're gonna be dining together very soon. Sindiswa, are you there? Do you want to turn your microphone on and tell us a story about a meal from your childhood that locates you within your culture?
Good morning. Let me start with this. My name is Sindiswa Manxeba. When I was born like the person that can do lots of things, and grew up at the Eastern Cape. We were planting maize, doing everything. We were not buying from the shops. We were planting by ourselves. We get veg from the garden and food, and I was a very person who liked to help my parents so we can get everything what he has to get to help. And it came to my parents when they were separated and they divorced and the life became difficult. And that made me very strong. And when I finished my school, the Eastern Cape, I came in Cape Town. And I started to work, but it didn't go well in the bank. And then I went to be a domestic worker where I worked very hard so I can feed my family and my sisters and my brothers. And it was very good because I was using my brain, but deep down in my heart, I wanted something that I can build from my hands. And like if we can plant spinach, like what we are doing now, we've got a lot of veggie gardens. And so that is why we're getting more veg from our safe kitchen to feed the children. So when my parents were away from us, I learned a lot because I became like a mother to my brothers and sisters. And yeah, that's why I'm strong. And I'm happy of what I'm doing. I'm cooking a lot. I'm cooking from Monday to Friday. I don't rest. And the food that we are getting, we're getting from the people that's sponsoring us. We don't have money, but we do feed these children because of the people that are helping us. And also, because my soup kitchen has grown, it's very big. I need lots of things, and there is somebody that is helping me on that. Like now, you can see me that I'm all over, even in Germany. There's people that contacting me there because of the guy that always helped me to take photos and distribute to YouTube as well, to the Facebook. The guy's name is Owen. I was saying to him the other day, if I can have money, he can become and work with me. So he can be my PA. As I'm an old lady, you can see me, I'm 63 years old. And I don't, you see these things, now I see myself in the computer. I don't know how to do that, but he's always with me all the time. And the food we are getting is the food that even Germany, they send money for food to the companies of food so we can buy food. And I love what I'm doing because it can, first of all, you must love what you're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, it cannot be going through well, you know. And when I started this, I started when it was a lockdown. And I tell myself that, whoa, I'm going to do this. And I want to, when the Department of Education was giving me the permit to cook, because at that time when the lockdown started, we were not supposed to be together. If they find, the police find you are together more than 5, they will arrest you. So I had that permit so I can flow. That is why I'm still flowing now. When I was doing that, I was at school, at the high school, feeding the primary school and the high school kids. But guess what happened? When the school was going to open, they asked us to move out because it was going to be overcrowded. Because now it became not to feed only the children of the school, even the children that they don't go to school, because they are sitting on the street, they've got nothing, they're hungry. So one of the lady from UK, she asked me if I have a bigger space. So I said, yes, I can sacrifice my house to open the kitchen. That is why I'm still cooking. I'm cooking at my house. I'm feeding them here at my house, Monday to Friday. If I don't tell them that tomorrow it's Saturday, if it's Friday, you'll see them knocking at the door. Makulu, Mama Cindy, we want food. Are you finished cooking? So that is the life I'm living with these kids. But I love them very much. Thank you.
So, Sindiswa, when we come back to you, I'm going to ask you to sort of flesh out a little bit more information around the kinds of meals that you make every day for these kids, which keeps obviously drawing them back. So we're gonna return to the story in a minute. Let's jump over to Benson now, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into cooking. You say that it started with doing the dishes, and then it took you to where you are now. Tell us that story from your childhood that helps us see you within your cultural context and community context.
Hear me? Can you hear me? And hello, can you hear me?
Benson, your line is not great. There's a lot of sort of stagger in it.
I'll tell you why. Yeah. Stay with me. Are you there?
Yes. All right. While Benson fixes that, let's move back to Traci. One of the lovely things about Traci's tour is you start at Kalk Bay Harbour. I don't want to give too much away. And then you walk through a memoir of her life, which then opens this window onto this very unique cultural context of the fishing community in Kalk Bay. Traci, imagine that you are standing on Kalk Bay Harbour, you're looking back at this little fishing village. Tell us a story from your childhood that helps us see you running over the beach, that little sort of viaduct area at the harbour, that helps us see the community through your eyes. And you just need to unmute your microphone, please. There we go.
Thanks. Well, as you know, because you've been on my tour, and most people in Cape Town know that Fishery Beach was the beach where people of color went to. Growing up in Kalk Bay, there were tidal pools like Dale Duke and Muizenberg Beach, Fisher Beach, where people of color were not able to access. Dale Duke Beach is just down the road from my house. So we spent our entire childhood on Fishery Beach. Fishery Beach is also historically important because since the 1600s, but particularly 1670s, you had Simon van der Stal setting up Fishery Beach as base camp for fishing, particularly with slaves. So that beach is very historic, actually. But growing up there as a child, fishers, that was our beach. And we spend all our holidays and even just during the day after school, usually one of the adults would round us up, particularly a lady called Auntie Basia. She would round us all up when either our mums were working, and she'd be like this mother hen, and she'd take us all down to the beach, and we would play in the water. I couldn't swim. I couldn't swim until I was like past a teen. So literally I lie on the sand in the shallows. You know that gusset in your swimming costume would just full with sand. So a lot of the time I was on my mom's back. And we were swimming in probably what was 99.99% E. coli in that harbor with all the boats and the diesel. But that harbor was safe. Like right up until today, I can't swim on an open sandy shores beach like Muizenberg or Fischhoek, because I just wasn't used to it. And that harbor made me feel really safe as a kid. We had 2 rocks in that harbor, it's still there. One we named Springbok, and the other one was Wharfie Rock. And we would swim as kids from the shore, either to Wharfie, run races, and then from Wharfie we'd swim to the boats, particularly boats that our uncle skippered, or from Wharfie to Springbok. So my entire childhood was spent on that beach, and we could also go alone as a group of teens, or except in December when all the buses came for the day to camp, you know, and our parents then didn't think it was safe because we didn't know the people that were coming on the buses. So, but yeah, in terms of my childhood, growing up there, it was like a second home, Fishery Beach, for us.
Thank you, Traci. So one of the things that really struck me when I did Traci's walking tour, and this actually speaks to all of our panelists today, was how the significance of the Group Areas Act and these efforts around separate developments by the apartheid state, what that meant for anyone of color living in this country. And I think what comes through so powerfully in last year's Food Dialogues report as a result of COVID is it shows how this separate development, which is actually forced underdevelopment of most of the country's population and privileged development for a small group of South Africans, has resulted in cities that are cemented into inequality, and how this impacts then on our location within the food system and our access to healthy food. And so much of the food hunger that we saw coming through during COVID was really just it made visible the kind of food hunger, food and nutritional hunger that has been around for decades because of this gross inequality that has been built into our economic system, the geography of our cities, etc. And Traci's story really highlights quite dramatically what the specifics of the Group Areas Act did in terms of marginalizing people and removing them from access to the kelp forests, which is where many of them got their food resilience from. Benson, let's try you again. Tell us about doing the dishes and how that got you to where you are today with your relationship with food.
Okay, I must apologize for, I'm assuming that if you're smiling that you can hear me, everyone. That's great. I had both my cell phone Zoom and my laptop Zoom running at the same time. Over-prepared, I suppose. There's a context there that I just want to shape that I was born in Hanover Park, Itasha Court in Hanover Park, on the 3rd level on the block of flats. And we left during the 76 riots and then moved to Mitchell's Plain. And Mitchell's Plain was a dust bowl then. Then my dad worked multiple driving jobs. He was always driving buses or trucks or big vehicles. And my mum worked in various shops. And they would both arrive within hours of each other. Probably between 5 and 6, they would start arriving, whether by bus or by car or whatever, and start supper. And supper, it was a copy of itself. Every Monday we had a specific meal. Tuesday we had a different meal. And I don't know if Traci can, or if any of the other panelists can identify with this, but you can know what day it is by what you're eating, and we can work backwards. On Fridays we grew up in an area where, even though we were not Catholic, Fridays we ate fish and chips. And on Thursday was a horrible meal, which I'll come to, which is the point. And on Wednesday there was a different meal, and there was always chicken curry, and there was always meat involved. And so maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday there would be meat, various types of meat, chicken curry or meat something. But on the Thursday, I could smell from outside what was being cooked inside, and I did everything in my powers not to eat world course. would probably be a stew with cabbage and bits of meat. I didn't like the taste of it, and I didn't like the smell of it, and I didn't like the fact that, you know, it was kind of poor people's food, so there was a resistance. Why couldn't we eat you know, white people's food? Why do we need to eat this stuff? So I would either eat it, very, you know, little bits of it, or I would try to feed it to the dog, and that's how I became an animal person, really, because the dogs knew on a Thursday that he needed to sit close to me. So that was, but so there was a scheduled meal, but then there was also the fact that the parents didn't have much time on their hands, so they needed to get home to cook, and the kids had to then either do the prep work, or they needed to cook it, or they needed to play some sort of role. So we would generally eat scheduled, and we'd eat late. After 8 was our meal time, and we would sit down at the table until we are done, and then we'd go and wash up together. And that was me that was for most of my life. Have I answered the question?
You have, yes. But how did that get you to engage with food the way you do as an adult? Let's make that link.
Okay. I am still, you can still hear me, right? Okay. There was a big gap though, because my biggest invitation into the kitchen was marriage. And maybe even before then, because I was the middle son, and I'm just going to sketch the cultural landscape here. I was the middle son, and I had 2 sisters, and they both could cook from very young, and I couldn't. And I was saying to my son yesterday, my son asked me questions, and he said to me, "Dad, have you always cooked?" And I said to him, "No, I had to learn cooking as an adult, because I had to elbow my way into the kitchen. And as I said, I could only get in by cleaning up. So I did a lot of cleaning up, and then so from the back end. So I am very comfortable in the kitchen. And once I've moved out at the age of whatever, 17 or 18, I lived with friends. And then when it came to supper time, we all looked at each other, kind of, what now, you know? And then we all had to fall back on what we knew. Tins of beans, and then you add in a bit of an onion, and then you add in a this and a that, and boom, you've got a meal. And then you were okay with the food that you had, but then you kind of, you wanted, you know, mommy's cooking. So then you kind of tried to remember how mommy cooked. And then you were forced, because you didn't have lots of money, and you didn't have the knowledge that she had, but then you kind of had to remember what she did. She braised the onions. She did all sorts of spices and stuff, and you kind of had to ask her when you saw her, "Can you write down a recipe for me?" So moving out of home was the key, and then of course getting married was just another story. I married a cook, and I told the story to a friend of mine a couple of days ago. I clearly remember the honeymoon. We went to Betty's Bay, and morning after, you know, you're both sitting there, that afterglow of whatever happened the night before. I won't go into detail, but now, like, who makes the first move in terms of breakfast and coffee and stuff? I grew up in the house where my mom made it. She grew up in a house where her dad made it, coffee and breakfast. So of course, both of us sat waiting. And,
sorry, Benson, I think I'm going to ask you to just kind of wrap the story up a little bit. We're going to have to move on. I'm sorry.
Cool.
Okay, sorry.
So
we have a lot of material to cover. It's interesting. I didn't live at home since I was about 9, because I was sent off to boarding school. So I didn't grow up with access to a kitchen, and under the tutelage of my mother around food. So I didn't really learn to cook. But I do remember when we were occasionally allowed home, one of my favorite foods, meals, was my mother would make macaroni cheese for our first night home. And to me, that is still the ultimate comfort food. Both of my parents grew up in the sort of post-World War II ration era, where they had a huge poverty mentality around food. And macaroni cheese was kind of the British person's meal. And my mum that was her thing, and it still gives me an enormous amount of comfort. Sindiswa, I want to see if you are with us. Sindiswa, so you were telling us about the fact that you make food Monday to Friday for children who come and eat at your home. I know that you also have said in our previous correspondence that you really struggle to get kids to want to eat healthy food, which I imagine is quite difficult when kids have such ready access to sweet foods and flavored foods that are sort of processed and quite addictive. Tell us about the meals that you make each day in your home for these kids that keeps them coming knocking on your door.
I start to cook on a Monday. Monday, I'm cooking sembe beans. We call it in my language umngqusho, sembe beans. Then Tuesday we do soup, and then we get bread as well. Wednesday it's a spaghetti bolognese. Thursday it's a rice mixed with all veg and chicken in. Then Friday, it is a rice not mixed in with chicken, but we'll do like you cook your food on a Sunday, you do a proper meal. You do rice, you do veg, you do spinach, cabbage, potatoes. You cook all that. We make 4 pots on a Friday, 4 dish in one bowl. We are
we seem to be losing Sindiswa. Sindiswa, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Traci, we're going to move on to you, and then we'll come back to Sindiswa when she's online again. So Traci, what's interesting in a lot of the research done by people at the African Center for Cities, etc., is they found the importance of food sharing between households, within communities, as a really significant resilience strategy. And again, this sounds like clinical analysis. But I know that you have stories from your own childhood that demonstrate this kind of food sharing as a way of keeping hunger at bay. Can you tell us a story? And just unmute your mic. Sorry.
There's so many stories. Oh, I can hear someone. Oh, Sindiswa's there. I don't know what's going on now.
Traci, you keep going, and we're going to come back to Sindiswa in a minute.
Okay, so there's so many stories, but particularly the community that I come from is small. It's small, but it's also big because there are 54 flats there, tiny flats that are either 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom, but with big families inside it. So for instance, we were 6 people living in a 1 bedroom home where we slept on couches and 2 in a bed and 3 in a bed. And my uncles would also come and sleep there because obviously because of group areas, they had to move to places like Retreat and Heathfield and Steenberg and Ocean View. But go to sea at 5. And so they would come with the last train at 12 and sleep on the floor up until 4 o'clock. So that they could go to sea. So we had lots of big families, lots of families who, where we all were, when there was the southeaster blue for 2 weeks, we had no food because there was no fish. Also, the earnings were very different. So you'd find that families who owned boats earned a lot more money than just crew members. And even for my family were always crew members. We had no boat owners in our family. So we were crew members, harbor cleaners, started like that, worked away, looted it. So sharing was a huge part of the community. And when my uncles went to catch fish, they would come home and bring us a fish as a thank you for letting us sleep on the floor, or put a note in my aunt's hand so she could send us to school, really, train fare or buy bread for sandwiches or stuff like that. Even now, you don't even have to knock on, I don't knock on my godmother's door, I just open it and there's always food there. Nobody went hungry there because there was always something to share. We had a corner cafe that was owned by Mr. Bray, and my mom lived next door to Mr. Bray. I never lived with my mom, but Mr. Bray would allow my mom to buy on the book. So my mom could get bread and milk and red skin peanuts and whatever she kind of wanted from Mr. Bray. And he'd write it in the book, and at the end of the month when she got money, she could pay him back. There was always a sharing. We come from a community where there were two denominations, but so Anglican, Catholic, and Muslim. And during the month of Ramadan, that food was shared with everyone. We call it puasa. Particularly on Buba Aunt, every Muslim home made a huge pot of buba, and all the little girls would come knock on the door and come fetch our pots, and those pots would get filled with buba. So everybody ate buba on Buba Aunt. There were probably around 300 of us, and we were all one big family. And on La Barang Haji, we call it La Barang Haji, it's like second Eid. Just before there would be a sheep in the Imam's garden. And so when you come from a fishing community, you don't see sheep on the daily. You don't get to go to a farm. You maybe see a sheep on the TV. So I was always mesmerized and literally went to go and look at this sheep every day. Just to look at it, because I don't see sheep often, well, at all, really. And count the days to this animal's demise, you know. And on La Barang Hajj, all the kids from the community, we ran to the Imam's garden fence, literally pushing each other. Afrikaans what they love is maul. We maul to the garden, push each other out the way to watch the sheep get slaughtered. And a lot of these rituals are rituals that are demonized, particularly by European white families. But these rituals play such an important role in our communities because, first of all, it's a very beautiful ceremony. And even though you feel sorry for the sheep, that meat is shared among the community. It's shared among the poor. So those rituals become so important when it comes to food. And those who demonize these rituals are very happy to go to Woolworths and buy a lekker braai chop. Now that we're talking about Heritage Day, or a steak or a chicken, not even knowing how those animals or how that food is prepared. And so there was much sharing of food. We lived with 4 flats in a block, and you just had to go next door and knock. And now, particularly in Kalk Bay today, there is not one shop that we don't have a grocer's store where we can go and buy food there. You have to walk to the nearest town if you don't have a car. So you have to walk from Kalk Bay to Fishhoek to go buy any kind of food source or even a panado, because every single shop in Kalk Bay, the shop that used to be the grocer is now sells wetsuits. So there is also that. And if you run out of milk or you run out of sugar or you run out of any particular kind of food, you're going to go knock next door to borrow a cup of milk, to ask for something that you don't have and just return it to the person when you can. And so that's the sad part of how Kalk Bay has become so touristy and so developed, is that the minority original inhabitants now aren't able to access that when they need it, you know. So, can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. In fact, Traci raises a really important point, and this has come through repeatedly in the food dialogues over the years, linking back to the African Centre for Cities research, is that when shopping malls move into communities, particularly into poorer communities, and when city planning permissions and strategies favor shopping malls over small independent shops, informal traders, etc., it pushes out those sources of credit, the kind of small-scale, local, relationship-based trading that happens between customers and food suppliers in cities. So by putting a shopping mall there, you might end up with this glitzy-looking, developed space within even a poorer community, but actually you might be undermining the food resilience of a family and community. All right, so Sindiswa, I want to come back to you quickly before we move on to Benson again. So one of the things that you mentioned to us in your Monday to Friday cooking for kids is you outlined the kind of foods that you cook, but obviously you don't have cash to go to the local wholesaler and buy all of your ingredients, and that you have to rely on sponsors. So just tell me a little bit about where your supplies come from and how you found these sponsors.
Thanks. All my sponsors, I got them through, as I mentioned earlier, about the young man that's helping me. He's a cameraman. He always comes when I start to feed and take the photos. And then before, I didn't know what is he doing about my photos, as I was just doing feeding the kids. But the other day he came to me to show me what he has done. He made a slide photos for me, a slide video. Then he told me that he put that in Facebook and also in YouTube. So after he did that, he put my phone number on. And then in 2 weeks after that, I got phone calls from different people that they saw what I'm doing. Then they asked me how to get me. They wanted my address, and the others, they asked me, how can we help you? Then I said, because I don't work, I depend on the grant money from the government, 1,800. I was taking that money so I can be able to make food for these kids. But I don't want to lie. Since Owen did that job for me, I had rest, because the people enter in on my soup kitchen, even the German people, even the Americans, they WhatsApp me and then they said, okay, you must do the quotation sent to us. Once you've got the quotation that is telling us how much is the food you need. 2 weeks back, I had the quotation that was from Yebo Fresh. I sent it in Germany. And then when the Germans got that quotation, it's also got the amount of food, and then they pay straight to Yebo Fresh. Then after that, they sent me the proof of payment, and then the food was delivered by my door. I never go by myself and go and buy. But what happened last month, there was a fire, the fire that affected the kids that I'm feeding. They left with homeless. They had nothing, no clothes, nothing, the school stuff. Then I told my sponsors what happened. Then what they did is they asked my bank account. Then I sent it because they wanted me to go and buy, especially the uniform and the bit of clothes that I can manage to get for them. So what I did is, I'm a kind of person, if you give me 10 cents, you said, this 10 cents, I want you to go and spend to do this, I'm doing straight away. So when the money comes in the bank, then I went to Weinberg, to Pep Store. I collected, first of all, I called the kids. I asked the age and the sizes. So they gave me all that. I wrote it down. Then I went in the shop and then I bought all the stuff that they need, especially the school stuff and the school bags as well, all those kind of things. Then when it's time to distribute, I call of them and then I gave to them, and then I took the video of them and I sent it back to the people that they helped me on that. Then after that, I went to look for the clothes for them, the home clothes. So the people are still donating the clothes for them. And then they are asking the sizes of the kids, like turkeys, as it's going to be a Christmas, because they lost a lot. So that is what I'm doing in my community. And in the community that I'm living in, I am the only one who's looking after the children. The other people are helping in the adults that they are taking the pills. So I always make sure that I send food to the lady who's cooking for the adults, because I cannot afford to help them like to cook. But that old lady is cooking for those people the porridge before they eat the medication, and then they are sorted. So there's something in that time. Yeah. And also what I do is, if the food is finished from my sponsors, I always go at the schools to knock and say, look, is there anything that you can help me with? Because I'm very short of food. And then they'll say, okay, send the guys to come and fetch food. Because it's like people will think that I've got money. I don't have money. I have money, but I can buy maybe beef stock and the other spice to take from my grant money. Otherwise, on a Monday, I get veg from the people that they are planting veg here. They plant cabbage, they plant spinach, they plant onion. So they do support me on that. And then there is a lady as well, is at the harbor. That lady has got a crash. She's getting sponsor fish from the people who's managing the fish. She always share with me. She always sends some to me. So I mean, I'm trying all the best. There was the day that I was struggling, and then I found the Eastern Cape, because at the Eastern Cape we plant lilies, we plant all the green stuff. I asked them to send it by bus to me. Funny enough, I had that huge, even sweet potato, and they sent me from my home, they sent me the oranges, fruit as well. And then it was delivered by my door from the Eastern Cape. That is how I managed to give these kids. But in the shop in next door, because I'm close by to the shop, I always go when it's in the middle of the month. Look, I don't have enough, but my grant money is coming. Can you please, my stamp is short, they always help. And then I take from my money. Otherwise, I don't want to lie. The guy that did the photos for me, he did an amazing job. I'm telling you. Even Marcella saw me. There is a lady that used to work on an amazing voucher. She saw me on a YouTube and then they liked me and then they contacted me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sindiswa. You know what strikes me about what you've just said, and also Traci's earlier story, is how important relationship is in terms of people being resilient within the food system. Both of you have told stories that are fundamentally about relationship. So, you know, in Traci's background, it was in a very small community where relationships were close by. And Sindiswa, what you've just explained is how that relationship is now able to happen across a global level because of the internet and technology. And in fact, there's an interesting installation in the last Food Dialogues report that looks at the opportunities of tech to help kind of make the food system work more efficiently, to get food from markets to consumers and from farmers to consumers more efficiently. And Sindiswa, what you've just talked about is the importance of the internet in terms of getting your message out and creating a greater pool from which you can hopefully access food for your kitchen. All right, Benson, let's come to you now. Sindiswa's touched on the importance of growing your own food within your own community, which again is going back to small scale and local. When the trend is large and global, and this kind of disconnection between what happens at the farm and what happens at the fork. Benson, tell us a little bit about the urban food production that you are involved with.
Yeah, I'm the geographics of where I live is important to know that I would be living on the original, one of the original farms in the Bishop Valley in the South Peninsula. So we call it Sunnydale, and it used to be a huge farm owned by one or two families in the area. So I live in a small holding, and I'm surrounded by other small holdings. And then adjacent to these small holdings is Masi. Now there's a huge contestation for land between the landowners of the small holdings, and I'm not a landowner, and the township. So every few years there's a notice put out that the area that we're living in has been demarcated for the expansion of the township. And then all the neighbors go into prayer and whatever because they feel as if they are unsafe. But the issue is that small scale, right around where I live, there's a density of farmers. So some of them are not small scale, some of them are small, large scale. So I've got access to various forms of meat. I've got access to vegetables. I've got access to eggs. I've got access to bread. And if you want to, I can tell you a bread story that happened to me this morning. I've got access to quite a bit. And I've also got access to organic waste that comes from the trading of vegetables on the Komikira sidewalk and even in Masi. And a lot of these things, how I know that we're in a good space is that a lot of these, which would have ended up in bins, are now coming to me. Some tomatoes rocked up 2 days ago, which tells me that there's a change. So there's a lot of small scale farming, and we're in a dense area. But if you go beyond us, then people are farming in their backyards. They are trying to sustain, but the number of people that are trying to sustain, they are quite small compared to the populace. If I were to drive down Masi and see how many people are selling vegetables versus how many people are growing vegetables, the numbers are huge. The numbers are even huger when you talk about access to land. And then if you drive through Fishhook, everybody's trying to sustain in some sort of way, whether on the backyard or on the verge. So that's the context that I'm in. And I'm hoping I've answered the urban farming question.
Okay. Thank you. So I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions that you would like to put to our panelists, please pop them into the Q&A section. We don't have any questions at the moment, so we're just going to keep cycling through some of these lovely stories. And the other thing is a reminder that the Food Dialogues platform is inviting you to submit your own stories. We want to hear similar stories from all of you, and maybe some of these panelists have given you some ideas of stories you'd like to share. And Kurt will put the link into the chat window to just show you where you go onto the website so that you can record your story for us and then upload it, and then we can share it via the website platform. All right. Traci, you have been capturing some of the oral history of people within the Kalk Bay community. And these once again just show the rootedness of that culture within the kelp forest and that marine landscape. Do you want to tell us a story that you have picked up from one of these walking libraries?
Speaking to the elders in my community, and way before apartheid even existed, there was a segregation. There's been a segregation since the 1800s. I'm sitting with documents from 1862 where rich colonial people started petitioning the mayor and the colonels, whoever was kind of government back in those days, to remove the fishers from Kalk Bay because of the smell of fish. It already started becoming a popular tourist destination, and I think when the railway line was built in 1883, it became more and more popular. And people who owned businesses there, like hotels and what you have, started also complaining because people wouldn't come and stay at the hotels because it really just smelled awful. And of course, you know that there was a whaling station, so even the blabber would get processed there, which was also led them to petitioning for a police station back in those days. And when I interview specifically my elders, I was interviewing Pa Freddy, and he was saying he went to the Catholic school at St. James, and that school was built in the 1900s, and he's 90 now. And interviewing him, he was telling me that the kids of color, the Filipinos and the mixed children had a classroom in the front, and they were taught by one of the Filipino teachers, and white children, they were taught at the back by the convent nuns. And he said that his job was to go to the windowsill and collect the bread that was left over, wasn't eaten by the white kids. And so that bread would get shared amongst the brown kids back in those days. And I said to him, so you ate leftovers? And he said, well, no, it wasn't really leftovers. It was just food that they didn't eat. And I was like, but it's leftovers. And so there's still this kind of way of not trying to not tell himself that, because it's trauma, it's traumatic, you know. So there was really a segregation before apartheid happened, and there were no houses for fishers. Fishermen were sleeping on their boats, and their families were 3 or 4 families in the shack. In fact, it was called the slumlands, owned by Jewish slum landlords back in those days. And the fisherman's flats was only built in 1941. And so he speaks of, and not just him, other older people, even in their 60s, speak of eating things like tornijn, which is a porpoise, and a mammoth, which is a seabird, and whale steaks. They prepared whale steaks. And so because of that kind of scarcity, I said to him, what did it taste like? He said, oh, well, it tasted like chicken, you know, and you were hungry, so you just ate, you know. So this is like prior to apartheid. And so with apartheid, you had many families, probably close to 30 families moved out. And those were families and boat owners who owned their own houses, and also fishers who were renting houses, for instance, in one of the roads, which was called Windsor Road, having to move out, including family members of mine who now live in Steenberg. And so I'm babbling on. I forgot what the question was.
I was so caught up in your story that I also forgot what the question was.
So collecting these stories around food. If I look in Kalk Bay, I can't tell you that there might be one obese person in Kalk Bay in terms of malnutrition, if you're going to look at it in malnutrition, because we didn't have access to restaurants during apartheid. So my first experience of a restaurant was washing dishes at the Brass Bowl as a teenager. That was my first experience of a restaurant. If you go down to Kalk Bay restaurant, you won't see not one person from the fishing community sitting there and having a meal besides me. My experiences of restaurants in that space is working as a waitress. I worked as a waitress at the Olympia Cafe for 10 years, and I had to learn everything. I had to learn what hummus was. I had to learn what olive tapenade was. I didn't know this kind of food. My experiences of restaurants is going to Milky Lane in Maynard Mall, catching the train and going to Milky Lane, not eating food. It is only post, maybe when I was much older and I was a student, and even older than a student. And the food that we ate that wasn't cooked at home was from the fish and chip shop in Fishhoek. And like Benson said, on a Friday, my aunt, who was a cook at the Calder's Hotel in Fishhoek, would go to the fish and chip shop, which is still there up and like till today, as a little girl, and bring home a fish parcel as a treat. But in terms of accessing spaces where food was made to buy, like sitting in a restaurant, we never. And even when I interviewed Parferi, I said, what was it like during apartheid? And he said, oh, well, you know, we just abided by the law and we didn't make trouble. That was like his words. We just kind of went about our business. He was telling me that only colored people could buy alcohol and black people were not allowed to buy alcohol. So he would go and buy and kind of give it to them. You would have I said to him, so were you allowed to go to the restaurants? And he said, where did I have money to go to restaurants? We didn't have money to go to restaurants. So it wasn't even about being allowed. And I made a joke with him and I said, but you had money for the off sales, you know, because he took it off. Which is what most fishers did. But in terms of access and not having money to go to restaurants, I'm sure that contributes to the malnutrition that we see today, the obesity that we see today, because the meals were cooked at home. I don't remember anyone eating vegetables there because the vegetables were bought in the shop.
You know what strikes me so much about what you've just said, Traci, is how, you know, food is so much about our cultural experience and our emotional well-being. And what you have just described is how this appalling kind of racist system excluded people from the food system in a way, or created a relationship with food that constantly negatively reinforced their sense of identity. So being given the leftover bread or not being able to access a restaurant was a reminder that the state saw you as a second-class citizen and was reinforcing that every single day. And it's hardly surprising that, you know, this one story you tell is of someone who has created a disconnect, a kind of emotional firewall around himself to insulate himself from the pain of being told every day that he's less than, you know, a full citizen, which again, as you say, is a form of repeated trauma. Sindiswa, let's come back to you quickly, and we need to keep the next stories quite short, please, because we're going to be running out of time soon. One of the things you said in our conversation earlier was how difficult it is to get kids to want to eat healthy food. And I think this is a story the world over. You know, how do you get kids to eat their greens? In your community, what veggies do you manage to get kids to eat? And what do you do to those veggies to make them appealing?
In my community, the kids are feeding. Before they were not eating the green veg. They were only eating potatoes. But the green veg, it was very difficult. So now, because we get the green veg a lot now, I had to teach them and show them how important to have that veg in their bodies. And then I had even the carrots, the others who said, no, I don't want the cooked one, it's horrible. But I managed to make them to eat all the veg. And I told them that if you want to be the member of Mama Cindy's Soup Kitchen, promise me that you'll eat veg. First, for me to make them eat veg, I said, we're all going to eat here at my house. We're going to dish. And then if you eat your food properly, you must know that by the end of the year, you'll get a present. So that is how I make them eat veg. Now, in the soup, we also put spinach in. They love it. They don't ignore any of the green veg. And you know, there is a veg that sometimes we order, the frozen veg. In that frozen veg, there are also peas, you know. But they used to say, what is this? And I said, eat, it's healthy, it's going to make you strong. And then the carrot is going to make your eyes to be bright so you can see more. And also at school, you won't be able to wear glasses like Makulu. Before, we never had this nice veg. That is why my eyes, I have to wear glasses. So you children, I don't want you to wear glasses. I want you to eat veg so you can become strong. When you play with the others, you can make sure that you move away, you move around nicely. Also, there was at the bottom of what you sent me, for the people to be strong and the big ones. Make sure that early in the morning you do exercise. So that makes you go and start your day nicely. You strong, you fresh, you happy. Now you're waiting for the kids to arrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Sindiswa. Whenever I look at youngsters, I think those are the people who in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time will be the doctors and the lawyers and the, you know, all the people that will be looking after me in my old age. So I really want those kids to be healthy and strong and well educated because they're our social support structure for when the rest of us retire. But I think, Sindiswa, what you're talking about is a universal experience, the difficulty that grandparents and parents have in getting their children to eat healthy food so they can be fit and strong and well. Benson, let's come back to you quickly. And in nature, there's no such thing as waste, as most of us know. But of course, the food system does often tend to be linear. And what gets thrown out the end of the food system is often seen as waste. And of course, this is a loop we need to close. And that waste needs to be seen as a resource. So tell us a little bit about how you're closing the loop within your sort of urban food gardening context. If you could put your mic on.
Okay, this morning, so I live in a little node, and there's a lot of business, agricultural and the like happening. And there's a baker nearby. He's a brilliant artisanal baker. For those of you, if you've been to any of the restaurants in the South Peninsula, then you've had one of his ciabattas or one of his farmer's whites. And he even sells from the Kalk Bay market and a few others. And it's a shout out to Clarence, the baker extraordinaire. So I go there on a Tuesday morning and I collect his bread that he can't sell. And in the beginning, it wasn't a thing. There was a bit of a tussle. In the linear thing, you don't quite know what to do with things that you can still sell that now ends up in the bin. There's no category for it. And all that we do is we create a category for that. We say that's chicken feed or pig food. And then once we've got a name for it, then we can proceed. So I went over to fetch the. Apologize, I just had my coffee delivered. I went over to fetch the chicken food, the day-old bread, and I would have driven there, but my car wouldn't start this morning. Real story, folks. So I took a walk there. And I went there and I said to him, can I take the bread? And can I also get 2 of your guys so that they can help me push my car? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you can have my guys when they're done, you know. So there's a bit of a wait. So I couldn't wait. So I took the bag and went. And as I was walking across back to my place, another gate opened. And this is a business that does they're called living walls. So they grow things on restaurant walls and whatever. And there was 3 guys. So I said, hey guys, can you help me push my car? And they looked at me and they said, yeah, it's going to cost you. And I smiled and gave me my bag of bread and said, there, it's all been paid for. And the transaction was acceptable to them. They were quite happy. They opened bread doesn't often come in bin bags. So they opened up this blue bin, said, okay, don't issue. And they saw the type of bread and it was still fresh. They could still smell it. And you should have seen the looks on their faces. So I'm here today. My car's outside because of a transaction between 2 parties where organic waste was the currency. So in the new space there are feeding schemes, there are restaurants, there are households that are beginning to see their waste as resource or as currency. Because we're exchanging it. You give me bread, I give you tomatoes. And there is still a huge challenge there because there's still resistance. There's still, I think that, I don't know where this comes from, and maybe I should ask the panelists. When people don't know what we are doing when we are talking about food security, food and organic waste as a resource, if they don't know, then they doubt it. They think that we are selling the food or that we are doing something that shouldn't be done to it. So every now and again, I bump into the ignorant restaurant owner or the ignorant household, and they say to me, no, we prefer to keep it to landfill. So there's my sign. I'm done with that question.
Okay. I'm really sorry to interrupt you again. So we do have 5 minutes left, so we need to wrap up. And what I would really love to do is to ask each one of you, if you can just in a sentence or 2, tell me how it is, or what has struck you about listening to the other panelists today. Traci, could we start with you? What struck you when you listened to the other panelists speaking? You can unmute your mic.
Can you hear me? Cool. Am I speaking to each person individually?
Sorry, just one point that struck you through either talk.
One point that struck me in all of our conversations is how we depend on community for food and for help, whether it's transaction or whether it's just sharing with one another, and how specifically Sindiswa has extended that community to even overseas. And that was kind of like the most important thing that came out for me, is that how important community is, community and care.
Okay, thank you. Sindiswa, would you like to just give us one sentence that that struck you, of something that struck you?
Something that struck me is it's when Traci was talking about bread left over. And I was it's always there to me that you don't give people the leftover. So I think me and Traci were in the same position of wanting people to treat people the same. You see, not like the few years back when there was the apartheid, you know, and it was difficult for us to reach the other places, you understand? So I think Traci, when I was listening to her all about the fish as well, you know, and again more from what she was telling us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sindiswa. Benson, very quickly, could you just give us a quick sentence or two of something that struck you from today's talk?
Yeah, it's quite clear, guys. I'm going to do it individually. I'm going to chop it up into small pieces like we would do in the kitchen. Traci, I like the fact that your culture and your connection to your roots is still very much intact, and that you can literally guide us through a walking tour by sitting here. And I think that's fantastic. It almost makes me hungry for fish. In the same way, Cindy, your connection to vegetables and the ingredient part of food also excites me. Makes me want to eat more vegetables. And I think, and why I'm saying this, you know, there's a cultural aspect, and I'm a little bit removed from where I was born and what I am now versus where I started. But today I've been put on a journey to go back to the past as if it was the future. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you, everyone. So I just want to thank each one of the panelists. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I really wish that we had been sitting together around someone's kitchen table, having the conversation in person, and maybe one day we will be in a post-COVID world where we can actually do that. So at this point, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'm going to hand over to Kurt to wrap up for us today.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And Leonie, really, really well done to all of you. Benson, Cindy, Traci, thank you once again for sharing your stories with us. Quite a lot of insights. You know, I was struck by, you know, in so many ways, how there are kind of connections, similarities, and echoes between them. I mean, there's Benson telling stories. I'm watching Traci in the background, nodding and laughing in recognition. Not everyone could see that, but there's a lot of, yes, I see you kind of going on. And, you know, the Cindy telling about the food schedule in the week, which echoes what Benson was talking about with growing up with a food schedule in the week. And there's Traci, who an hour later chimes in with fish and chips on Fridays. And that kind of is a common experience. And Sindiswa talking about not going shopping and taking food from what's there around the household and in the area. And then Traci talking about not going shopping. Well, also they can't go shopping because there aren't shops, but then going down and foraging and a childhood lack of dependence on formal retail and maybe not complete dependence on what one can grow. But, you know, those are, again, similarities. And then Leonie, what you mentioned about the common context of the Group Areas Act and the impact on everyone who's here. And, you know, the conversation touched on family and childhood and community and marriage and spiritual practices and geography and employment. I mean, everything. And then I think about what it means to have this broken and unjust food system that touches so many parts of our lives. I mean, imagine if our food system was actually healthy and supportive and nurturing. And I think that's really the one of the drivers of what kind of makes this all worth fighting for. Is there can be so much more for so many people with this. So anyway, enough of me on my soapbox. I just want to say, before everyone goes, thank you for being here. Don't forget tomorrow's event also at 10 o'clock, where we're in conversation with 3 remarkable chefs and Ishe Govender about what a plate of food can reveal about, again, our connections, our culture, our food system. And we also are going to have another panel on the 14th of October, and that will be moderated by the director of the Center of Excellence in Food Security, which is Professor Julie May, looking at the connections between global events like the UN Food Systems Summit that's happening this week and our local context. So a bit of a panel of experts, but having had the local voices kind of lay these things out, it's a way for us to kind of link with some things that are happening in the broader world and see how we connect and what difference it makes, and frankly why we should care and yeah, kind of focus on these things. So that'll be on the 14th of October. And let me close by just saying thank you again, Leonie. Thank you so much, Cindy, Benson, Traci. It was a great session. Lots of insights, interesting perspectives. Thanks also to our host and co-sponsor, Solve the Waterfront, and our co-sponsor, the Center of Excellence in Food Security, for making this year's Food Dialogues possible. And thanks to all of you for being here, and all the best for the rest of your day. We hope to see you again tomorrow. Ciao.